Would now like to invite all three speakers, so Professor Calarco, Andreas Boehm and Thierry, to join the discussion about the application-oriented ecosystem. And to join me as a moderator in this discussion, I invited today Dr. Jana Lehner, who is a Chief of Staff at Quantum Brilliance, which is an Australian-German company for full-stack room-temperature quantum computers based on diamond technology. Jana holds a PhD in theoretical quantum optics, and she has an extensive experience in business operations, business consulting, and software engineering. Welcome, Jana. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Natalia, for this kind introduction. And also a warm welcome to our guests. You know them already from the talks before, but I would like to welcome Tommaso Calarco. Welcome. Thierry, and also Andreas Boehm to our discussion. So in the previous talks, we heard a lot already about ecosystems, the European Quantum Flagship, the QuIC Consortium, and also we got a view from the SMA perspective. Now in our discussion, we would like to go a bit deeper and bring all these elements together. We would like to have a focus on the question, what do we expect from an application-oriented ecosystem here in Germany and in Europe? So the term ecosystem is heavily used today, so it's everywhere. It's kind of. What do we have in mind when we talk about the ecosystem? We heard a lot already. What is the view from the quantum flagship? We heard also some expectation from the other end, from the industry. So talking about this, what could that mean? Is it everything from research and education to business? Is there a problem with the technique? I have an echo.
Okay.
I hear everything twice. That it's a bit confusing.
Maybe you turn off your loudspeaker.
Maybe. It should have been turned off, but okay, sounds better. Sorry for this interruption. So yeah, ecosystem, is it everything from education, from research to business? Is it everything from supplier to producer to the end user? Does it include enabler and partner? Does it have to focus on consortia, on networks? Is it public funding and private investors? Is it building supply chain, partnerships and collaborations, or maybe perhaps everything? The question we would like to start with today is what is the purpose of a good ecosystem, and what are the key elements we would like to include in this ecosystem? I would like to ask this question to all of our guests, and I would like to start with Tommaso. Could you give your view about this question, please?
Yes. So for me, it should really be broad. So in my view, all the dimensions that you have mentioned need to be present. And if you say what is sort of the main point for me is that, not only everybody plays their part, but it's a system. So the parts connect together. And I do see it in some cases, in some situations. I do not see it everywhere. I must say, especially on the political side, I see a problem here. Like in Germany, for instance, our chancellor told to the two ministers of the previous cabinet, please, I want an ecosystem. Please, here are 2 billion, go and do it. And they said, while sitting at the table, yes. And after standing up from the table, they said, oh, let's take the 2 billion, and I take one, and you take the other one. That is not what I call the kind of integration which is necessary, such that all of us can come to the goal. So the ecosystem must consist of different parts, which really everybody does their part, but it is tightly integrated. At European level, From the community side, I think that we invested a lot of energy in doing this. Also, QuIC is doing that. I see a lot of opportunity. Now we just, in the advisory board meeting of the flagship that we had last week in Munich, we really decided that we wanted to push forward also a tighter integration between the member state national initiatives and the European one, all of us together. That is also relevant for the question of international cooperation, for instance, towards the US. So this is, for me, the most important aspect, all-encompassing and tightly integrated. We know how to do it. We need a little bit more commitment also from, let's say, national decision makers.
Oh, thank you. Thierry, what would you say on this? Would you agree with this holistic approach?
Yeah, I certainly agree that it will take many actors playing their part, but as Tommaso emphasized in his response, also coming together. And this is where QuIC also in itself, in the way we work, we bring different members together to work on topics that are common to the drive and the development of this new sector. I'll focus on one aspect of the question. As you said, here our panel really looks at application driven. And to me, when taking that as a goal, I also hear application focused. What does that mean? I think it means orienting the development, the very rapid development of quantum technology specifically for the needs of end users. And it's true across the board. And it's about creating a handshake between those two worlds. On the one hand, companies that are driving and developing new quantum-enabled solution. And on the other hand, a set of end users that are very keen to integrate new capabilities in their products or new capabilities in their operations, don't, however, always understand the technology. We need to come together and create this handshake. And this is where QuIC in particular comes in this ecosystem drive that we have. But I'd like to take one example in particular here just to bring home the point. In the quantum computing space, over the last few years, as computers have started to emerge, the conversation about how to evaluate them and measure them and evaluate their progress has been very technical and very hardware developer focused, things like the number of qubits or the quantum volume. In thinking about application driven, I think it would be important to consider this particular area from the opposite end. What do end users need? How can a quantum computer help build better airplanes, better cars, optimize an electric grid, new capabilities altogether, maybe for drug discovery? Having this opposite end approach where we look at the end goals and we work our way back to what those computers need and what the algorithms need to be and how we make those work together in order to address these particular points is, I think, something very essential. QuIC has taken note of this, along with some other partners elsewhere in Europe, and we're really working hard now to drive home this idea of having end-user focused set of benchmarks for quantum computing development. We're bringing this forward. We've started to engage with some partners, notably in Germany, the two ministries that Tommaso referred to. We're hoping that they will move forward very quickly with us on this, as it is a very time-sensitive topic. There's a lot happening globally, and Europe should not fall behind on this. So this is one example where application-driven is important. Europe is present, end users are there, getting motivated or getting active, providing those examples. It's about, however, moving fast with means, with purpose, to make sure that we can get this handshake and get the quantum computers that are being developed to match those industry needs that are there.
Yeah. Very important point. So that at the end user is probably the group that should mainly benefit. Is it the private sector or even the business sector? They really have to have benefit from the quantum technology. Mm-hmm. Andreas, your view on this, the application driven.
Yes, all the good points is just said before. That's right. But I have to say, my focus is the industry side. And so the industry side, therefore, the funding is enormous important, because we have the classical industry up to now. It's no business case that they build up quantum computing machines or whatever. We have high-speed electronics and this deep temperature and so on, all that stuff. But it's now it's not a business case like for Google or for IBM to build quantum computers. A car manufacturer built cars, no quantum computers up till now, maybe in the future, however. So. And let's say the main big industries have seen these topics, but my point of view is, let's say, the next line of these companies. We have here in Germany, let's say, companies which are, we say family companies, family driven, with about 6,000 or 7,000 employees. This is not a small and medium-sized SMU in a European vocabulary, but they already exist. And I, for my own will, would say this is enormous power, and we should show them how can they get into this technique, into these topics, and what can they do now? What can they do in 5 years? There is a reason why the DAX companies build up the departments in these points, and it's not a point of return of invest. They have different points of view, and all the suppliers and the other companies should also have a look on this to learn now that when the hardware is scaled up, the software should be finished. So, and this is, I think, this is also a slogan which is used often. We are working now to analyze our problems, to develop the algorithm. And if this hardware is large enough, so we can speed up our problems. So, as I said before, we have to address also the user. For what is it good for? It's not. I think that the topic quantum computer or quantum technology has left the lab, not completely. But we have also still a basic research is necessary. Research and application level research is necessary, but we can do with it something. Yes, it's not for specialists. We can also informatics or electronic students can now solve problems via cloud access, maybe. Yeah. So it's ready. We can work with it. We can learn with it, and I think this is very important that also the industry sees that they have to learn here, and that they are in this deep tech in the next future, also in the economic plan of this world, take part. That's.
Yes, from all of you, I hear that you see the main challenge today really to bring the technology into the industry, into the business. So we have a strong research here in Europe. We have also strong development. We have a lot of funding for this early stage in the development of the technology. But how can we manage to go then on to the next level, to come to the next level of integration, really building production of quantum technology products, and most important, how we can integrate them into the standard, the regular industry problems, to convince the industry that here is really a chance for future solutions.
I can maybe venture into a first answer to this question. I think all industry more and more is there, and so I think it's first off looking at the early movers, those who are already doing something, getting engaged, working with SME startups, joining associations like QuIC and others. We're very pleased to have many large industries in particular who are there not to develop quantum technologies, but to utilize it. So we have some very positive experiences and a good starting point. And I think this also fuels and drives similar movements, similar reactions from other large companies, other members of industry who also want to be able to benefit from this technology as it comes on. So what we see is an early start. I think what we can do is to continue to mention how quantum technology will be able to have an impact in the future. The technology still needs to grow, it still needs to mature, but it's very important for companies to understand that the transition of the today to tomorrow is not a straightforward one. It's not an easy on-off. There's a lot of work that goes into anticipating this, to preparing your internal staff, your internal teams to work with this new form of a technology, this new way of thinking about things in a quantum mechanical fashion, and that this needs to be a gradual process. It takes time, it takes effort. So to start early, usually in a collaborative way with like-minded companies, really helps to prepare yourself, and the impacts for the long term is very beneficial. Everything that's been said about how quantum computing, quantum communication, the new sensing capabilities that will come online, those are true, even though it takes time for the technology to mature. But the preparation for that transition starts today.
So go ahead.
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that I fully concur with that, and I could add from the side of the scientific community that we can and should support that in the sense of, providing all it takes to make this successful. So it is no longer so much about convincing new companies. They start being convinced, but we must make sure that they have success, that it works. That they see, not only that we convince them because we tell them how wonderful that is, we will always do that, but we need to, that they themselves, they start harvesting evidence that this is really bringing advantages. And this from the side of academia, supporting might seem, okay, a boring service task. It's all but that. It's very exciting because it's about, training new people which have the competence to, build up in these groups and make the translation. It's about engaging with industry as users of quantum computers, both in a decentralized level and also in this infrastructure that I mentioned before, and translating and listening to what they want. They have sometimes exotic problems like whatever. I mean, the other day, Peter Leibinger from Trumpf at the laser mess in Munich said, we can use a quantum computer, wait a moment, to tell a laser how you should cut in an optimal way metal pieces of a metal sheet. Okay, this is something which not even under the high influx of vodka I would come up with. Okay, but it's not boring. It can be very exciting, There is a lot of mathematics involved in translating this for computers. So it can be very exciting, even though it is something which would be in service of enabling those companies to say, oh, wow, it works. Let me do also the next problem. So it's really about enabling, and this involves not only this translation work, but also it involves a lot of the basic, the groundwork, which is about developing new algorithms, really from the computer science side, some stuff which is not yet there for industry, but there may be some exciting problems around the corner, and maybe they would be grabbing those, as well as the really hard work of improving that hardware, which has still to be done to a large extent in the lab. So there is a lot of exciting scientific development to be done, which can really be in service of the industries which start being interested. They realize, oh wow, this is not just something for the future. It's not some funky thing. It's practical. It's coming. I can get something out of it.
I think you made a very interesting and also important point. So we have, from the quantum technology side of the medal, so to say, we have to also look to the other world. Where are the problems that should be solved? And the question now is how we can connect the two worlds. So are we maybe too much enclosed in our quantum technology world? Do we have to step over to the industries, looking at their problems in order to attract them, that they can see, well, here is a new technology that may help you in problems in a way you may never have thought before?
Yes, but this is part of my job, I think, because to make the different, the research sees the solutions from the, let's say, from the problem side, from the mathematical side. We have to turn it out into the different branches to make clear that optimizing of robots, optimizing of traffic, traveling sales management, fulfilling different bottles, or cutting metals with a laser, that it is the same algorithmic stuff. This should be clear to the industry. And if they learn, if they understand these connections, that it is mathematically the same, and this is the problem which can a quantum computer now typical solve until a special degree, that is the same. This sharpens the point of view which the companies look in their processes, production processes or whatever. I think this is the point you have to catch the branches where they are, not from the quantum side, but from the principle side. We have this method. What is it used for in your company, in your company? And this is a different awareness from the CEOs.
Yeah. This is one part of the ecosystem, I would say, extending the ecosystem to find application outside. But when we come back to the original view of the ecosystem, focusing on the quantum technology, all that is required to build a structure, a strong quantum industry here in Europe and in Germany, we see a lot of consortia, networks, organizations building up. So we heard a lot about the European flagship and also the QuIC. What do you think is the main benefit of these organizations and having also several in parallel? What is the challenge to not to compete too much, but to have a complement in their existence? I would like to direct the question to Thierry first, please.
Good question. I think a lot of the groups that you've highlighted in that question have, to begin with, slightly different and therefore complementary mission, from sparking this, especially German industry, when you think about the new financing programs that have been developed. An organization like QuIC there to support the growth of industry, the quantum flagship, which is both industry and research, getting that handshake really strongly done. So each group has a slightly different angle, and by bringing them together in just the right mold, in just the right way, I think we can really drive things forward. Your question a moment ago about how can we make that happen and how we can bring on board different groups, and do people need to go maybe outside of their comfort zone, outside of their usual environment of operation to support this growth? I think that's a very good point. And the answer to that is yes. Companies are being forced to think about their own internal challenges, the very key areas of their own operations that might benefit from quantum. What are they, and what would it mean for them as a company to evolve? It's not always easy to do this and to do this translation. And on the flip side, for not only companies, but also researchers in quantum who have this very deep, extensive knowledge of what it means to operate quantum mechanically, taking advantage of these fundamental properties, but being able to understand what are the real world challenges that are out there, what are their different characteristics, and the different also non-quantum, non-science characteristics that they need to work with in terms of how their operations are done today, what are some of the constraints that they have to deal with. So to do that requires translation from both sides, and it requires both sides to step out of their usual areas of comfort. QuIC as an association is there to foster exactly that. This is one example. I mentioned quantum computing at the beginning. I'll come back to it now as a sort of further step on this. The end users, the companies have developed or have defined a set of use cases. So real concrete applications with, granted, not proprietary data, but artificial yet relevant data that characterizes these problems. They've captured that. They've created a small dossier about it. This is now ready, and we're looking for that engagement from academia, from researchers who have this knowledge, and to say, hey, try it out here, try it out for this application. What algorithm, what methodology, on what system? either entirely quantum or perhaps hybrid, something like a variational quantum eigensolver for those listening who are familiar with this. What are some of the strategies that could be adopted, and what is the performance that could be expected, and how does that compare to how these companies are operating today? Very meaningful question, very impactful answer, but not something that researchers necessarily do day to day. So here's an example of needing to step out of the comfort zone in order to have this impact and help the sector continue to evolve.
Tommaso, what would be your view on this question?
My view is just an iteration of what I said before. It's a connection, dialogue, exchange, and listening to what your counterparts, the other actors need, because. And here is actually another quote from Hartmut Neven. So now I'm really advertising for Google. That's really the wrong place to do that. But anyway, Hartmut is a German, so maybe perhaps I'm allowed to do that. And another quote I like from him is, it's really not a race between nations or between companies. It's a race between humankind and nature. And so we better do it together as we can, right? So for me, really the foundation for all of this. And, yes, it is a way, I agree I know what Thierry means when he says going out of your comfort zone. But it doesn't mean that you are going to be uncomfortable, or that you're going to do something which is, disadvantageous, or you have to give up something. It's actually, we create a bigger comfort zone in which we all thrive, and we only do that by sort of forgetting, now I have a goal and I must prevail, okay? So, and, realizing that, co-petition, of course, we don't want to be naive. It's not just about, cooperation like in science, if you wish, but co-petition is something which at this stage is really the center for making progress. Nobody can do that alone. Not one single company, not one single consortium, not one single organization, not one single state. That's the key point for me.
And if I can add to maybe Tommaso's answer, I certainly agree that it's about extending the comfort zone, and that's really the best way to put it. And I think in both of our answers, there's one thing that comes out, and that is for action. I think it's important to mobilize, to act now, not later. Companies are there, they're looking at this, they're getting themselves activated, providing ideas as to how this technology might impact them. And so for everyone in the sector, regardless of what you're bringing forward, whether it's the end use or that knowledge that can be put to application to try and do the translation and help this technology have that impact that we anticipate, to be able to act today. I think that's really, really important. And without this action, it won't be possible to complete this translation. So it's about moving fast and moving now.
Yeah, I really like this idea of enlarging the comfort zone so that we can better cooperate. I see one difficulty or challenge maybe in the problem. So quantum technology is really complex, a new technology no one can do alone. On the other hand, we have the businesses, especially the startups, the smaller business, but also the big companies. They have their goals, they have their targets, they have their business to drive. And here we have the ambiguity. Working together is one thing and important, but on the other hand, everybody has to take kind of its own share of the technology and of the development, and also of the market at the end. So how we can balance this? So not forcing, but driving cooperation to the benefit of having a strong quantum technology in Europe, but on the other hand, ensuring also that the individual partners have their own share, have the way to develop, especially important for the small and medium business, for the startups. They should survive also in this environment. How would you think we could balance this problem?
Well, that's of course the central challenge. And of course, cooperating does not mean here are my customers, please take them. That's not the point. And we want those customers bases to grow, of course. The point is there are so many aspects which are general, collective, which are, overarching, and which can only progress if we do it together, that there is a lot of engagement needed. One example, benchmarking. How do you know that your, technology X-based quantum computer is better or worse than the technology Y computer, maybe produced by a certain Z US company? Okay, and do we want really that those benchmarks are defined by some particular company, which will, of course, tailor them in such a way that, theirs gets on the top. And this is really something which everybody can only profit by having a common basis. And this is something which, since it is so diverse, it can only be done if you have the superconducting people, both from science and industry, and the ion people and the atom people coming together. So developing these common benchmarks is really something which requires cooperation and is going to foster, the strength of those who can achieve in competition the best performance. Getting common standards is another example. The aspect of, the workforce is something which, it would not really be very wise that, okay, now startup X says, okay, I will now train my own people. We need a broad marketplace for that. And we need all those universities, as they develop these skills programs, we need them to listen to all the needs of all the big and small companies so that they give us something which is usable. So there is a very broad range of topics which can only be done together. And of course, and then once there is this level playing field, and once there is an infrastructure which allows us to move forward, another one is pilot lines, testing facilities, okay? For nanofabrication, access to those things, okay? A startup has no hope to getting access to that. But if all startups come together and they say, okay, now here is what we need, let us, for instance, in the CHIPS Act, let us bring forward this kind of activity, this kind of infrastructure, then again, everybody has the opportunity then to compete in the best possible way. So there is a lot of room of things which are needed and can only be done together. And then let us compete and kill each other. But, that's for afterwards.
Hopefully we do not come to this end.
I also hope so.
So what do you think, who should facilitate these driving for corporations? Are these rather the networks or the organizations like the flagship, like the QuIC, who should best support this collaboration? Or is it the government who should provide kind of infrastructure support? What do you think? Where do you see the focus?
So when you have an either or question, there is always a quantum answer, which is the superposition. It's all of them.
Yeah.
Entangled together. I don't know what my industry colleagues think.
Yeah, no, I second that. I think it's going to be across the board. Certainly QuIC, from its very inception, was dedicated and designed to allow members to work on these many different topics. And I think the answer that Tommaso just gave is right on point. You need to be careful what topics you address. There are some that are collective, like education, training, standardization, IP can be added to that list. And there are other aspects that are natural forces of markets, of free markets, and we have to let those play out. We have to let companies compete against one another. And over time, there will be mergers, acquisitions, some companies that fall short, and that's simply normal evolution of any sector. So it's really important to distinguish what are the collective, what are topics that need to be worked on together, and what are subjects that need to be left to each company to work with.
This brings me also to another important question. So we are talking about the problems we have in the ecosystem that are really obvious. It's technology, that is how build the technology, how identify use cases, how find users, customers. But Tommaso also already mentioned the benchmarking. And there are also a lot of important stuff when we build a new technology that may be in the background, behind the scenes, so to say, not obvious to everybody, maybe not obvious in the early stage, but very important important to define, like the benchmarking. Would you see other problems or other subjects to have in focus now already, before it's too late, in terms of developing a comprehensive quantum technology, a strong technology here in Europe?
Of the technology in a way that makes it very meaningful for end users, for final applications. And I think that subject ties very closely back to standardization. And standardization is also about agreement as to what are some of the key characteristics of a certain kind of technology. It's important not to standardize too early, because you need to let the different solutions, the different particular forms of this quantum space to evolve and to take shape, and then see what are the different characteristics and ultimately land on a few different set of standards. So not doing it too early, but engaging in a conversation now so that we can anticipate the growth of this technology. Unless there are actions taken today, the risk is that we then fall short. We then leave it to other areas to define what the benchmarks will be, what the standards will be, and that ultimately is detrimental for companies that are trying to have success here in Europe.
Would you see that? Would you say that the consortia we have today in these specific questions are rather on the same track, or is there a lot of competition still here in Europe? So do you feel you are aligned well, covering your area of expertise with the consortia, or do you see more? Or do you feel more like competing?
I'm not sure.
That question for me? Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Well.
Okay. Yes. So, in terms of consortia, if I think of scientific, like research and development consortia, which is a part of the sort of the upstream part of the ecosystem, I do not see such a sort of course there is competition in the sense that there are different platforms and you try to develop them best you can, but it's not translating into some rivalry of any kind. And there's a lot of connection and cooperation on common themes in research. Some of them we have mentioned, for instance, benchmarking, and others are also relevant. For instance, I don't know, software control, stuff like that. But if I look at the different initiatives and consortia on the industry side, I wouldn't say that there is so much competition, because actually I do not see two consortia which aim for the same target. There is a certain differentiation of targets, for instance, here in Germany, between the consortia which have been mentioned before, and there is an increasing. Every time I meet these people, like last week in Munich, we understand better what are the complementarities between the different things, and there are propositions of better connect and to, so for instance, involving QUTAC or as the quantum chapter, the German chapter of QuIC, for instance, and engaging with QBN, the Quantum Business Network, for sort of more, what are the complementary lines, and I see fun, and it is a wonderful word, sort of like, bring together the teeth of the cranks, so to say, to, combine things together. This is the stage in which this can really happen. And so I wouldn't say it is from competition to cooperation. It's sort of a deeper and broader level of cooperation, because there is already some complementarity. That there had been some attempt, I should say, from some people. After we announced the European Quantum Industry Consortium, some other people said, we are going to do the European Quantum Industry Consortium. consortium. And they even, I think, tried to incorporate something like this. And we had some conversation. That was a real competition, okay? But it was hopeless. And they disappeared. So there is not so much in that.
So would you say we are moving into the right direction to keep a level of focus on
actually since a few years in which we had nothing, and now we have a lot of entities, and they are also willing to, I mean, really when you talk to the people, of course, when you do this kind of political thing and you talk all together in a nice panel discussion, everybody's smiling. But, and when you talk, behind the scenes with the real people, it could be like, throat cutting, backstabbing and so on. I don't see that. Okay, so it is really not happening. I really just talk to people even behind the scenes, and they really say, oh, what can we do together? So it's really moving in a nice direction, I should say. Even, believe it or not, between a different German länder, this is happening.
Well, we are not talking about this right now.
No.
Let's remain on the European level. Thierry, would you agree with that? Do you see a similar movement in the right direction in the focus?
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of cooperation and willingness to work together, and it's about finding where are those points of convergence. In Germany, for instance, there's another large association, QUTAC, with its own mission. And on some topics, for instance, the use cases benchmarkings, I think it goes hand in hand with what QuIC wants to do as well. We have different aims, different focus, QUTAC being especially geared to having large companies working concretely together, developing in details these different particularly identified use cases. QuIC is less focused in that direction. So this is a point in place where we can have a sort of harmonious transition from one to the other. But I think for the most part, you see such collaboration on, again, the areas that are common. And I do agree with Tommaso that the conversations that are happening across Europe, that QuIC is engaged in, are very positive, very constructive, and it's a demonstration of a genuine, broad willingness to see success in quantum in Europe. And I said it several times already, but I'll repeat it again because I do think it's important. Speed, action today, so going beyond the words that are being shared today or in other venues, and to really take this to where it matters, to work on these benchmarks, work on these standards, help with education focus, get movement forward so that we can prepare the future quantum ecosystem today. That's extremely important. And this is where I think that the focus is and where everyone is looking to be, making sure that actions are taken today so that we're in a good position tomorrow.
Yeah. Andreas, looking at the consortia from your perspective, how how SME could benefit from the consortia, from the different...
benefit is obvious, but let me say something, though I'm not really part of this discussion previous because I have nothing to do with standardization and so on. This is clear, and this is also an argument which says no, it's no competition. We have it's enough space for everybody who wants to play on this ground of quantum technique. And on the other side, I thought it in a system theoretical way, and I fit the companies from outside to the quantum systems. So it doesn't matter for the industry or for the use cases which uses quantum as, let's say, as a tool. It's not important how the standardization inside all these Q companies is. If you want to be a supplier of this whole ecosystem, it's important. If you're writing software and algorithm, it's important. But if you only want to use it as a classical industry, I think it's not so important. So it comes from outside to the systems. Or am I right? What do you think? Or am I wrong?
Yeah.
Unless you're the moderator.
Yeah, I think we come back, moving away from the pure quantum industry again to the more holistic view on including the industry as a whole.
Yes. Now to come back to your questions, all these consortia are very important. We are also part of this quantum industry consortium. We are part of this quantum from this Planck consortium. We are all looking at these topics from the different point of views, from different angles, with different use cases. And this is very important to work as a translator, let's say from outside to this inside, to bring it more together and to bring it more to the industry and show what they can do with it.
We're coming now close to the end of our conversation. I would like to ask you, what is the key challenge we have to solve as a next step in order to come to a better application-oriented ecosystem? I know there's a lot to do, but what would you say? What is the most important one we will have to face and solve as the next step? Would like to start?
I will start. The biggest one is quantum advantage. Practical quantum advantage. By that I do not mean just in quantum computing, but I mean use cases in which you really have value, and you do not have no longer just value which is going to come maybe in the future, but which starts being tangible, even though maybe symbolical, even though maybe small, because it is a long-term thing, as we know, because we have to do right expectation management and not imagine that huge advantages around the corner. But really, we should all commit this integration of finding use cases for quantum computing, which can be relevant. Maybe something which you can solve with 50 qubits, maybe a problem which is a complete niche. Or maybe with quantum sensors, some very specific application, I don't know, in medical diagnostics. But, we really need to, all of us, bring this to the foreground. And this requires a commitment. And here I speak, of course, for the scientific community in terms of, helping, supporting, and so on. But it also requires a little bit more courage from the, industry, because it is one thing, like several companies are doing, we have a little team because we are going to learn, because we don't want to miss the train when it comes. But some companies, also some big companies, I see them really engaging strongly and really putting their hands into the dirt with substantial teams which, are moving forward. So we really need commitment to having, the first fruits that start really being developed, because this will set the ball rolling, and this is what will take us through the valley of sort of crying, maybe not death, but it will be sort of pain, and so we have to be carried through that, right? And so we need some commitment to get something out where we can smile again, so to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think Tommaso's answer was great. So he sort of stole my first idea. I'm going to focus on something a little bit different, something that we haven't talked about on this panel, but to leave the audience, I think, with something to reflect on. We're in a position now where many companies have started, they're starting to grow, and they're also for themselves and their own evolution process entering a stage where larger sums of money will be needed. It'll be counted in the several tens of millions to hundreds of millions of euros. An important ingredient to make sure that this transition happens well and that these companies can stay at the forefront, in addition to quantum advantage in these different sectors, will be ensuring an adequate supply of private capital to support this growth. This is perhaps an area where Europe, compared notably to the United States, is weaker, or at least not quite as endowed. And I think this is a point of focus, a point of attention. And in order to draw in people, it needs to be made clear what exactly are the European advantages, what are the key characteristics that make this ecosystem and the startups present so very attractive and so very competitive? And the answer to that question is many of the things we've talked about, things such as IP, the talent pool, the education, standardization, the very activities that characterize us, and how all of these efforts are happening today. They're done in a collaborative way with many different people involved. All of this being part of a big picture that needs to be presented so that we can ensure that we have the right financial means to keep moving forward.
Right. And to say it maybe in a much more simplified way than Tommaso did it before, someday the project manager in the industry has to come to the CEO with the PowerPoint and say, this we can do better, this we can do faster, maybe in a small way, but there's a plus, there's a plus, there's a plus. And so the commitment from the top down is again here, and the show goes on, the ball is unrolling. So quite clear, yes.
Oh, thank you all for this very interesting conversation. So we are, where are we in the ecosystem today? We are on the right track. We think we are going into the right direction. We have a lot of activities going on with consortia. They're aligning in a good way, but also focusing on their specifics. We see still some challenges in order to make the turnaround. It's a path to go, but we think we are on the right track. So let's keep moving. And thank you for your contribution.